Part of Double P Media, doublepmedia.com.
This is Spawn Center, Get Up Edition.
Good morning. It is me, Mike Greenberg, Greenie, here with you on Get Up. And today we are talking about all of the major events at the Comic-Con in regards to the Lord of the Rings. I've got a special panel with me right now. First, we have Coach T.
Formerly T, the artist formerly known as Coach Trolloc.
Exactly. And also we have with us Billy Ork. Billy, welcome. I have no idea what you just said, but I welcome you to the show. Let's talk about some major things that happened during Comic-Con in regards to the Lord of the Rings. Now, I don't know anything. I don't want to say anything because I really don't know anything, but it seems to me that when a new trailer is released, fans of this show get blown away. And I mean literally blown away, because there were lots of explosions in this particular trailer. And again, I don't know anything. I don't want to say anything, but I may have heard something. It seems to me that the first time that we ever saw explosions used in the films, I remind you, I know nothing. I don't want to say anything, but I'm going to say it anyway. But in the films by Peter Jackson, it seems to me that we saw the first creation of a material that can cause an explosion. So I ask, how is it possible that in the Second Age, long before Saruman invented gunpowder, that we are able to see explosions in this trailer? Coach T, let's turn to you first.
Well, Mike, I don't really know how to explain this, but, magic happens in the world of the Lord of the Rings. I'm pretty sure that Billy Ork will agree with me here. I think you're just jumping to conclusions that it happens to be gunpowder. Also, remember that there were many types of things that actually had explosive properties or flammable properties long before gunpowder was invented. So I don't think you need to get too excited about that.
Well, I don't know anything. I don't want to say anything, but I completely disagree. Perhaps if we turn to you, Billy Ork, you can tell us what we're seeing here. Okay, well, that seems to explain it all. We'll be right back on Get Up with our 738th straight day of talking about the Lakers.
Yeah. Welcome back to Bustin' Blockbusters. Matt here with you. I've also got Coach T with me. Formerly T, the artist formerly known as Coach Trolloc.
Better.
And yes, we're a week late. We know Comic-Con's already been over for several days, but we had to get to Coach T's Westworld review on Sunday, so we're putting out this special Thursday edition of the podcast to talk all about the Lord of the Rings, which premieres on September 2nd on Amazon Prime. We'll be covering it here. So happy to have you with us.
That's right. We've got a trailer to talk about. We've got the panels to talk about. You've even got some new music to talk about.
Yes, I'm very excited about that.
And more importantly, we learned a heck of a lot more about the overall mission of the 5-year series that is planned. I'm really looking forward to this.
As am I, Coach T. Don't forget, at BustBlockbuster on Twitter. You can send emails to mattsaudioblog@gmail.com.
That's mattsaudioblog@gmail.com.
You can use the contact form at mattsaudioblog.com, and you can also find everything that I do there. That's mattsaudioblog.com. And don't forget that we are part of the Double P family of podcasts. Look for their YouTube. That's where our videos show up.
YouTube.com/C/the word double, the letter P, the word media.
That's right. Use that same spelling for the website, the word double, the letter P, the word media.com. And find all of their socials like Facebook.com/the word double, the letters PHQ. Same spelling for Twitter, at the word double, the letters PHQ. And the same for Instagram.
Hey, Matt, if I could just quickly say, I really had fun putting together that little skit with Mike Greenberg. He's such a fabulous guy. A pleasure to work with. Although the way he tries to work in questions or his own opinions is a little annoying sometimes.
Well, I was actually more impressed with Billy Ork than either of you, to be perfectly honest, Coach.
Billy is a very sharp orc. I agree. He's a lot of fun as well, and he's super smart. I mean, did you hear the answer he gave Greenie?
Yes, I did. He sounded more like a zombie to me than an orc, but...
You just don't understand the language and the nuances. That's what it is.
Oh, okay. Well, I am always open to learning more about cultures. Maybe we should have Billy on sometime.
I don't think that your podcast is kind of high enough on the level to get an appearance from him, Matt.
I can imagine that that's true. So, Coach T, what do you want to talk about first? We have so much stuff here.
Well, I feel like we should talk about the panels first, and then maybe about your music, and then we can break down this new, wonderful, glorious trailer. I mean, all those helmets stacked up. Imagine all of the elves and humans that were killed there. I love it.
That would be the thing you would glam on. Okay, let's get into talking about the panel then.
Now, Matt, I just want to say one thing here. I think we should do this kind of rapid fire, like we each just rattle off a thought. It doesn't necessarily have to be in any kind of order or anything. And the first thought that I want to bring up is about Aramir. I was really impressed with that actor. I love the fact that he's got all of these moves, and he says that he can attribute that to his own personal culture as an actor, as a Puerto Rican. I love that. But one thing that strikes me about Aramir, as we'll talk about even more in this upcoming trailer that we're going to talk about today, and all the trailers that we've seen before, is that Aramir seems to have the moves. He's got all the moves that we expect from an elf. And Aramir is evidently a Sylvan elf.
Correct.
But he has moves like Legolas, and Legolas had some moves, and I believe that he was a Sylvan elf as well. Is that correct?
Well, here's the thing, because Legolas actually grew up in the Sylvan elf culture, but his father is Sindarian, and it's believed that his mother probably is too. So if you're trying to make any kind of linkage to the bloodline of the elf being able to do these acrobatic things, I don't think that's necessarily the case. However, I can't rule out the fact that all elves have these skills. It's just that when you're in the Sylvan culture, perhaps you learn more of it at an earlier age, and that's why Legolas has these moves in common with a true Sylvan elf like Aramir.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, although I doubt that it's correct, but it makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's move on.
Well, how about we move on to the showrunners themselves?
You mean Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne?
And producer Lindsay Weber. But yes, exactly. I had not really seen them or heard that much. I mean, you read some articles from Entertainment Weekly or Variety or whatever regarding them, but this was the first time I actually saw them in person, so to speak, even though I was just watching a video.
And what did you think?
Well, I was very impressed by them. They seemed to really love the series, and I don't know what direction they're going to take, what kind of holes they're going to fill in the Tolkien lore. There's a lot of holes in the Second Age, but we do have some broader bullet points: the fall of Numenor, the creation of the rings. It's going to be a 5-year series, so they have to have a lot of it mapped out.
Oh, Matt, if I need to remind you, there was a lot of terrible reaction to a couple of guys who worked on another fantasy series using bullet points to finish their seasons.
Yeah, but I think there's a little more in the appendices relating towards the turn of the Second Age to the Third Age when we have that ending that won't make it quite as bad for this group of showrunners.
Well, I will say that they certainly do seem to know all of the tongues of the Lord of the Rings. They're very familiar with the way to speak all of it. They kind of seem terrified, if you want to ask me.
Yeah, actually they did. And wouldn't you be if you were trying to produce this show that had cost $465 million for the first season, which of course includes the rights too, but over $200 million for a season, and Amazon spent all the money on these rights, and they said, here, take this baby and run with it.
Well, there's one other thing to point out here, and that's they said that Amazon just said to them, make the show that you want to make, which is great. They get a lot of creative freedom and what have you. And I'm sure Amazon's going to try and spin this into a lot of subscriptions to Amazon Prime and what have you, and that's great. And it's great that maybe studio execs weren't interfering all that much, but it also means that they may have hung themselves in this panel by saying that, simply because there won't be anybody to blame when a bunch of fanboys start coming around and throwing tomatoes at them.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of true too, but at least they're willing to take the chance, right?
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to at least seeing what they try out.
Me too.
Well, another question that I have is, what did you think about the Harfoot portion of the panel? There was a whole lot of Harfoots. And as you know, there's been a lot of resistance to the fact that Harfoots are being seen in the Second Age or any kind of hobbit-like creature, which I felt like that the showrunners defended pretty well simply by saying that just because Tolkien didn't write about them doesn't mean they weren't there.
And also how, really, even though they're not human, they represent the most human aspect of all of us. The sense of hope, the sense of courage against great odds. And those are all themes that were resonated throughout the entirety of everything that Tolkien has written that did concern hobbits. But there has been a lot of fan resistance to this, and I'm not sure why.
I don't exactly know why either, Matt. I think that it's kind of weird that they're just trying to use the fact that Tolkien didn't write anything about them as a means to be hateful. And there are a whole lot of Harfoots in here, so it's clearly going to be a focus of this series. And there's something I noticed when that panel was introduced. Markella Cavanaugh's picture of Nori, Eleanor Brandyfoot, didn't come up on the screen when her name was announced. They kind of skipped right over her. Did she really receive that much hate from the first trailer that maybe they felt it was safer just not to show who she was on the big screens? Because I feel like that's a terrible injustice to an actress who hasn't done anything to offend anybody, at least not yet. We haven't even seen an episode.
Well, I'm not going to go all conspiracy theory on it or anything like that, Coach, but I do feel your point here. I feel like that Nori Brandyfoot, played by Markella Cavanaugh, has received a lot of very unjust hate from, as you called them, fanboys who think that they know Tolkien better than Tolkien knew Tolkien. So I'm just going to urge our audience to hold off their judgment, watch a few episodes, and keep in mind what McKay and Payne said in the fact that you need them as kind of the heart of this story. To me, it's like elves are often too perfect, even though they are flawed. Dwarves are too imperfect, even though they do some incredible things. And right in the middle here, in the Third Age, you have the hobbits, who represent the best of everything. And I'm hoping that the series makes us look at these Harfoots in that way as well.
I would agree with that.
Anything else regarding the panel itself, Coach?
Well, you mentioned elves and the fact that they're flawed. I thought that portion of the panel where all the elves came out was quite interesting as well. I did find it interesting that Aramir was not appearing with them. I guess that's because of the connection with Bronwyn and her boy Theo, which I gotta say, that young actor, what's his name?
Oh, that would be Tyron Muhaffedin. I believe he's Australian.
Yeah, he was a charming little dude. I really liked him a lot. I thought that he was telling a good story there about his excitement for getting casted.
Yeah, I enjoyed that too. And I think you're right when you say that Arondir was placed with that group because of that relationship, the relationship of forbidden love between elves and humans. I also really enjoyed the comments that Nazanin made about her character, Bronwyn, and how the showrunners have made great efforts to show the strength of the female characters in this series. Because I felt like Peter Jackson did an okay job with that, with Galadriel and with Arwen as well. But you just kind of expect that behavior from elves in general. But there was a lot of emphasis in this panel on the fact that Cynthia Addai-Robinson's character, the Queen Regent Muriel, and Bronwyn both have strengths within them, and probably flaws too, that will make them compelling characters and at least characters with agency.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. But let's get back to the portion of the panel where there were more elves. We saw Celebrimbor, who is played by Charles Edwards. And remember that Celebrimbor is a very integral character into a lot of the things that you actually ended up seeing played out in the Peter Jackson films or in the books themselves, like The Doors of Durin, The Forging of the Rings. Talk about a flawed character. That's a huge mistake, forging those rings.
That it is. And really, in terms of what we saw from this panel in regards to the overall story, we got much more of it mapped out very vaguely by the showrunners, while the actors tended to keep their cards a little closer to the chest, because naturally, they want you to see their performances and their interpretations of these scripts that have been written by McKay and Payne and numerous other writers, Cahill, Doblo, Hutchinson, somebody I'm very familiar with, Brian Cogman.
Yeah, there's about 9 of them or 10 of them. I'm not exactly sure, but you really do get a sense from the showrunners that they are surrounding themselves with people who can take good care to craft the proper story. They even said that, they consulted Tolkien experts as they went along, Tolkien scholars and all that stuff, which, of course, Matt, you and I are not, so we probably wouldn't know the difference when we were watching this.
No, probably not, because, as has been said, there's not a lot of material on this particular age at all, just some kind of key events, and so I'm glad that they're taking that extra care as well. To play the whole thing out over 5 seasons with only just a few major bullet points means that there's going to have to be a lot of care taken so as not to enrage those, what you called fanboys, which I would agree with.
And we've drifted off my subject yet again, but that's okay. I think we've talked enough about the panel. There was one big thing right at the very beginning of it, though, wasn't there, Matt?
That is correct. We got a huge introduction to some music for The Lord of the Rings, which, as you know, is the thing that I like to talk about most, and an introduction to the series composer. Now, here's what we've learned in terms of things that have become more official in regards to the music. Both Howard Shore and Bear McCreary, who, oh my God, he's done the music for so many huge hits, such as The Walking Dead, Outlander, of course you may remember Battlestar Galactica. He did some work for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I've particularly enjoyed his Outlander stuff, and I know that kind of show may not appeal to the kind of audience that typically listens to our podcast, but I think it's a really lovely story, and it's Bear's score that helps to bring a lot of the emotion that comes with that series to it, which is what you expect a composer to do. So I was very excited to hear the premiere of one of the pieces that will be part of the series. I'm not exactly sure if it was a composition of Bear's himself or not. I'm assuming that this portion was Bear's composition, but I can't say that for certain. I won't know until we see the first series. But Howard Shore is also credited for all of the episodes because not unlike the deal where John Williams created a theme for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series and then Natalie came in and did everything else, I kind of suspect that that's what's going on here.
So these old guys like Williams and Shore, they get to come in and write one piece, and then they get to collect all of the money for all 8 episodes because that one piece always shows up in the series, right? So even though I guess you can't say that they're retired, technically, they're still making money.
Yeah, Coach, I wouldn't look at it exactly like that. But I'm sure that whatever Shore has composed, and perhaps he has for some of the trailers or not, I haven't looked that deep into it, folks, so don't go hating on me for that. But I am going to talk about the piece that we heard at the very beginning of this panel, because it had a lot of great themes in it, a lot of timbres, some mixing of rhythms, wonderful harmonies. Basically, all of the things that I investigate when I am analyzing a score for a television show or a film or whatever.
Well, this is great, Matt. Why don't you get right into it? Do you mind if I hang around and chime in every once in a while?
Well, normally I have to go over to the studio in the back in order to do this recording, kind of separate from where we do this.
Well, why don't I just grab a mic and come along?
Well, okay.
So, Matt, we were making a comparison to John Williams and Howard Shore earlier, and I just want to compare the opening of this theme that Bear conducted as being very similar to a John Williams piece itself, the Duel of the Fates, where you have the big choir opening. This one had a big choir opening, too. So is Amazon just merely copying Disney Plus in regards to everything regarding this series and music? I mean, giving a composer credit just for creating one theme while another one does all of the work, and using big vocals in order to try and create epicness.
Well, now, Coach, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say that. Remember that when Revenge of the Sith came out, and that piece by Williams came out, this was one of the most anticipated stories ever as to the fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin, right? And I think that Tolkien fans are expecting that same kind of epicness. And I'm glad that they delivered a big vocal here at the beginning. By the way, do you know any of the Elvish that was being sung at the beginning of this?
Well, of course I don't. I only speak Trolloc and Orc. I don't speak Elvish.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. You know what? I don't know Elvish either. We're not Tolkien experts here. But there was this big opening with vocals. And that's one of the things that I like to talk about is all the different timbres that a composer uses. And I think it was great that whether you consider this to be a copy of John Williams or not, it doesn't really matter. It does depict epicness. That's the way big chorus openings work. But it started with this.
Now, Matt, why does that sound dark to me? I'm really drawn to it because, you know, I like dark things. But why does that sound kind of mean, kind of evil?
Well, one of the things that happens is you have a fixed pedal point. The bottom note isn't moving. It's staying in the same place. And anytime harmony changes over the top of that, it creates tension. Additionally, everything here is in a minor key. And that's the harmony being implied as well. So we've already covered two things. The timbre, which is the instruments that are played, in this case the vocals, and now the harmony, which is in minor, which tends to have a little bit darker sound to it than major. Major tends to make you feel happier, whereas minor tends to make you feel darker, either scared or angry or sad.
Okay, well, that makes some sense. Now, that phrase repeats, right?
Well, most of the phrase repeats, but then the orchestra comes in with the vocals, and we get a building to a climactic point to where we can start the main melody. And that building sounds like this.
Yeah, that really makes me kind of get on the edge of my seat ready for something to happen. Why is that?
Well, Coach, one thing that is happening here is the fact that it all builds up to what we call a suspended 5 chord.
Nobody told me I was going to have to do math, Matt.
Don't worry about the numbers, Coach. Just remember that anytime you have a 5 chord, it's considered a dominant. It means it wants to lead somewhere. And something that adds even more tension to it is the fact that the 5 chord starts out in what we call a suspended form, meaning that it's not really a complete 5 chord until that last note drops. And that even creates more of a building of the tension to where you're now ready for something to happen. And composers have used the suspended 5 in a lot of ways. Sometimes they use the suspended 5 and they never resolve it to anything new. And that will drive you crazy. It'll make you think you have to have some kind of finish. Now, fortunately here, the composers want you to continue on. And so they don't leave you hanging. They go right into this little motif that builds up leading into the melody. And this is where we're going to get into the rhythm of things, because you'll hear each beat subdivided a lot more than it has been in a lot faster subdivisions, and that helps to elevate your heart rate and make you excited. I'm talking about this.
So you're saying that the fact that it goes from dot 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 dot, that's what makes my heart beat a little faster, because my heart was beating a little faster than it was before. I mean, I felt a lot of stuff with the first part too, but now I'm kind of just ready to get into it.
That's exactly right, Coach. That is exactly right. And you'll notice that almost any theme for any TV show tends to have subdivisions in it, because the whole idea is to pump you up so much, especially back in the broadcast days, not so much now with subscription television and with streaming services and everything, but back in the day, a big practice for main themes was to subdivide a lot so that you would feel the need to stick through the commercial break and come back when the show came back on. It was all kind of a psychological trick.
Well, I never could even find the beat for Deep Space Nine's theme, so I guess that's why I always flipped back to Spawn Center as soon as the credits were over.
Maybe so. Maybe so, Coach.
Well, what happens next? Now we're going to get into the actual theme itself, right?
Right, and that same pulse stays underneath the melody initially as the melody is played. We have this great solo violinist who's playing this melody.
You know, I just want to comment something about her. She was a fabulous player. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from her talent, but she seemed like she was kind of showing off with all that moving around and all that stuff.
You see, Coach, this is exactly why the producers did not like your dance moves, so to speak, when you were trying to make hit records.
What do you mean?
I mean, there has to be some stylistic flair. Does she need to do all of that to perform those notes? No. But does it help her feel it? Possibly. Does it provide additional entertainment for an audience? Absolutely. And that's what the producers were looking for from you.
Well, I think that my moves speak for themselves. Anyway, what's that melody sound like?
And Coach, here's where we can address the fourth thing that I look at when it comes to music scores, and that is the melodic shape. What kind of story is the shape by how high or how low the melody goes, or how big the jumps are in between? What does that tell us about the story itself?
It seems like a pretty deep topic and highly interpretive to me.
Well, I can't really disagree with you there. It is pretty interpretive, but to me, big jumps tend to mean big events. And what is this story building to, Coach? It's building to the huge event by the end of the series regarding Sauron having forged the rings and an alliance of men and elves and what have you have to face off against Sauron. So the big leaps help to emphasize the fact that this is not going to be a smooth ride. It's going to have some volatility in it. And again, our harmony is still very minor, but it kind of floats back and forth between the minor and what we call its relative major.
So why would you do that? Why not just keep it one way or the other? Because I like the dark. I think it should just be dark all the time. It should just be nothing but dark. Why are you trying to tell me that there's major chords in there when you told me earlier that major chords tend to make us feel happier?
Well, because every story has to have hope in it, Coach. If you don't have hope, what's the point of going on?
Well, I honestly hope that most humans, when they see me, realize that there is no hope of going on, that I'm going to have them for Camelin barbecue.
I see. Well, at any rate, here you have a mixture of the minor and what it's called its relative major, meaning that all of the notes are the same, yet where you start and where you finish are different. There aren't any differences in sharps or flats, but instead of starting in G, in this particular case, to go to the major harmony that is relative to it, you would start at B flat.
Is that information really necessary?
Well, no, I guess not. I just try to prove to fellow musicians that I actually know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, moving on. So that phrase repeats, right?
Yes, it does. Not exactly at the end, though. They change it a little bit so that they can transition into the next part. The ending, if you'll notice with the melodic shape for this first one, the last little bit went up. This time it goes down. So you get the ending like this. First part. Second part.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. That's pretty clever. But why? Why are they doing that?
Well, they're doing that because they're transitioning to a brand new part. And because it's kind of the answer to the first phrase. Usually, if you think about a question and an answer, there has to be some degree of opposite in it because the person seeking the answer doesn't have it. But the person who is getting the question does.
That makes zero sense. Anyway, what happens next? Oh, this is a part that I really like. It's a part that's got all kinds of great beats in it, and it feels like everything flips upside down and everything.
That is absolutely correct, Coach. What happens there is mixed meter is being employed. And what mixed meter is, it's weird counts, or at least they feel weird to us as humans. We don't like our harmony to be symmetrical. When harmony is actually symmetrical, meaning that it's easily dividable by twos or threes, we tend to not like it. But for whatever reason, we like our beats to have that beat. No matter how many counts you have in a dance move or whatever, it doesn't matter. You still tend to want to do it against a symmetrical beat. And mixed meters are typically not symmetrical. There are things like 5/8. There are things like 7/8. In this case, it's 7/8. And this makes me think of another Howard Shore theme, the Isengard theme from Peter Jackson's movies that also employed mixed meter in order to create a sense of darkness. I'm talking about this.
So that was the Isengard theme then?
No, that was what we heard at Comic-Con.
You got me all confused. You misled me. You made me think that we were going to hear the Isengard theme. The Isengard theme, something like ba-ba-bum, ba-bum-bum.
Yeah, that's it, but don't ever sing again. Now, something that's interesting about this particular melody is the way that the harmony is implied within it. It kind of almost goes back and forth between minor or major, the way that it sounds. However, what's actually happening here is a half-whole scale is being employed, where the major third actually becomes the fourth note in the scale, and so you can use both the major third and the minor third.
Matt, that's a bunch of numbers that I don't understand and I don't really need to know. What does it mean in terms of how it sounds?
Well, okay. It means that it sounds exotic and menacing all at the same time. It sounds like this.
Yeah, that does sound kind of creepy. So that's the theme for the people that I should root for, right? I guess you might call them the bad guys, but for me, they're the heroes of the story.
Probably so. I mean, I don't want to say exactly because we haven't seen any footage and we don't know what themes are associated with what pictures. But I think that you can probably say that since that does sound so menacing, it probably is a theme for things that are more geared towards your way of thinking.
Good. That's what I wanted to hear. But what about the rest of this piece? And we got to hurry up. We've still got the whole trailer to talk about.
Yeah. There's just one little more thing that I want to add here is that then after all of this menace, we get back into this kind of almost sweet sounding, sweeping strings with a beautiful melody that starts to bring us back to the main melody that we heard. Now, when we hear the main melody at the end, it's pretty much done in the way that this sweeping sound has, as opposed to the fast subdivisions that we heard earlier. But the way it's all set up is with little passages like this that kind of allude to the melodic shape, but offer different kinds of harmonies. It's what we call developing the theme.
Developing the theme. All right, good. What's it sound like? All right, now why do you call that sweeping? What do you mean by sweeping?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of bending in the bows. I also mean that there's a lot of different kinds of rhythms going on here, Coach.
Okay, like what?
Well, for one thing, you have the regular straight eighth kind of feel that we've been having, the da-da-da-da-da-da, but there's also subdivisions of triplets, da-da-da. And what's happening there is combining those two makes everything feel more organic because it doesn't all fit into the same kind of structure.
But I thought you said that symmetric beats are what we look for, and that doesn't sound very symmetrical if you have all these different counts.
Actually, it is symmetrical. It's just, it's subdivided in a way to where the beats are still lining up. We're just dividing them a little differently. And that's what makes it feel more organic.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good talk, man. You ready to go back over to the other place and start talking about this trailer? Because We've been talking about the music for a long time, and I don't know that everybody likes to hear about the music.
Well, actually, Coach, I think it's probably the only thing that people do listen to us for, because it's the one unique thing that we have to offer.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. I think that my opinions on Westworld and whatever have been fantastic. I say we get back over there and start talking about the trailer, though.
Okay, agreed.
All right, man, I know you really wanted to talk about the music, but I'm just going to sum it up for the people here real quick.
Oh, you are? And what are you going to tell them about the music in the trailer?
Well, I'm going to tell them that melody that the violin player was playing, you could clearly hear being orchestrated by the voices in the trailer, going from the dwarf dinner, that's a double D, all the way through to some of the children with the boat and the sail. You can hear that melody there.
Hey, yeah, that's pretty good.
You can also hear the melody done with a little bit different of a rhythm during the Galadriel stuff in Red.
True, and
it's done by horns instead of by voices.
That's right.
I really like the way that flat second chord hangs during that night shot of Numenor, and then Muriel showing Galadriel the Palantir.
Wow, I think you've got this down.
So that's all you people really need to know about the music for this stuff. And how dare you think that I couldn't do this, Matt? I mean, I am formerly T, the artist formerly known as Coach Trolloc. I mean, I know my music.
Well, first of all, I will point out that the recording industry evidently did not see your musical talent, and I caught you looking at my notes.
What are you talking about?
You're looking at my notes.
Oh, that's nothing.
All right, so you want to talk about the images, I suppose.
I really do. Oh, my goodness, there's so much goodness in this. Lots of looming death, lots of danger, lots of monsters. But I think the first shot says it all. It's what makes my heart skip a beat. It makes me just flutter a little bit when I see a whole bunch of helmets, meaning that a whole bunch of people died, and they're all being stacked up. You know, they've been trying to make estimates of how many helmets there are, and we've heard like 30,000, and somebody did some kind of special math thing, and they figured out by the volume and the camera angle and everything that it was more like about 12,000 allegedly, and I don't care. I just know that it's a lot. That means that there's a lot of dead elves.
Yeah, probably so, because this is probably the aftermath of the War of Wrath, which was a 40-year war where the elves fought with Morgoth, the primary evil in the world that rebelled against the Illuminor and all of that. So they'd been fighting this war for a while, and it looks like Galadriel is helping to honor the dead with this pile of helmets.
That's right. Then we go to a shot of Linden. It's actually a shot we've seen in prior trailers as well. But now we have this little ceremony going on, and I'm not sure if Elrond is looking over this ceremony or not. There seems to be a lot of people gathered, perhaps on the peripheral outside, but they're definitely not part of the ceremony itself, because he and some of his other elf companions are dressed in this very pretty bluish, greenish kind of color. I'm not good with colors. I don't see real well, but I can tell the difference between that and the white that Gil-galad and Galadriel are dressed in, as he places this kind of wreath over her head and says, "Today our days of peace begin."
Right, and if they've been at war for a lot of years, then perhaps this is a ceremony to celebrate the end of what they perceive as being the evil. I also wonder if this is tied to some kind of storyline for Galadriel where
she turns on everybody and kills them?
No, I don't think that ever happens. Remember, we see even on through the Lord of the Rings books and Peter Jackson's films that Galadriel is pretty much fighting evil all the way to the end. What I was going to say is that maybe she feels like her mission is complete. And we've seen so many shots in trailers of her seemingly being on a ship that was sailing towards a great light. I wonder if this was a group of people who thought that because everything was over, their mission was over and they could return to Valinor.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. Boy, if she thinks she's getting out of it that easy, she's in for several thousand years of torment.
Yeah, I guess so.
I will also say that they award some pretty nice prizes for winning wars. That's a pretty nice, like, golden wreath that they place on her head there. And then we get a shot of the dwarf dinner. That's the double D. That's where that music kicks in, Matt. And who all is in this shot? There's several that we can identify. Looks like Prince Durin is at one end, the dwarf. We can see Elrond there. I believe we can see Celebrimbor there. Several other elves as well. Probably Galadriel that's being hidden there behind the elf in the center. It's a pretty quick shot, but they're all toasting. They seem happy. When's the last time you saw dwarves and elves getting along?
Gimli and Legolas?
Yeah, I suppose that's true. But that was thousands of years later.
And then we hear a voice that says, "We thought our joys would be unending." And we see a shot of some children walking along a river. There's a little paper boat there. Lots of boat motifs in this. I think, again, to set up that a group of elves are going to make the trip back home.
I can't disagree with that, Matt, but what happens after that?
Well, then we've got, I think it's men. It could be elves, but I think it's men who are laying down this sail.
Hey, can you tell what that emblem is on there?
I really can't, Coach. As we try to say, we're not Tolkien experts. We don't really know all of the symbols or the languages or anything like that. We're just trying to enjoy this as a TV show, so I can only take what they give us.
I suppose people are going to yell at you for that, but that's okay.
And then we do get that shot of a ship sailing towards the light, which again, I think is Valinor. You see those same birds flying in there, and it looks like in this shot that they're coming from the light towards the boat. I suppose they could have circled around from behind the boat, but either way you want to look at it, we're going to find out probably in the first episode.
I would agree. And then we get some stuff that we saw from the rock falling from space. It turned out to be something actually kind of important, Matt.
Yeah, I may have gone a little bit too far with that gag.
Exactly. But we do see Papa Harfoot here saying the skies are strange. And then we see Aramir and Bronwyn watching the meteor go by. But then we get a new shot. And I find this intriguing as well. Look at how well that's lit up, how beautiful that is. Has to be Numenor and some kind of tower there in Numenor, which is where I believe that Muriel and Galadriel located when Muriel reveals the Palantir to Galadriel.
It's been quite a while since we've seen one of these in action. Happy to see that they brought that back into the story. They are, of course, used to be able to see what's happening in other parts of the world. They're kind of what they call, actually, Palantiri is what it's called, and they translate to seeing stones, basically. A number of them were brought to Numenor, and then some of them were taken on to the other lands. We've seen them in the hands of Saruman. We've seen them at Minas Tirith and Gondor. And interestingly enough, it's kind of unknown how many of them were made in Valinor by Fëanor and then brought to Numenor. So you could see a Palantiri turn up anywhere. It's great that they have them here to pay tribute to the fact that several were brought from the west to Numenor.
Well, I agree with that, but what happens with this thing? She puts her hand on it and does it explode?
Actually, Coach, I don't think that it's actually exploding. I just think that that's some kind of effect to show us that we're seeing what she's seeing.
Well, then is what we see in the next shots what she sees? Because that's kind of sad. You get this image of a great battle with orcs and elves happening, and an image of, I believe that is Galadriel's brother?
Yes, I believe that is correct. I think it is Finrod. And if you look at the shot where she's looking over him, there's a couple things to note. One is that she starts to take a dagger from him, and I believe that that dagger is very important. And you might notice that he also has some scars on his arm. Now, there is a story as to how he got those scars, but I'm not sure, because I don't know what they're going to relay on the television show, how much of this story I should give, because I really don't want to spoil it for anybody unless they change it up.
Well, I think you're just being a little bit too vague there. You might as well have not said anything at all, Matt.
Well, let's just say that you see him in the battle shot, but it's not necessarily the battle that kills him.
So you're saying that he is dead. I guess we should have given a spoiler warning.
Yeah, probably so.
Now, I want to backtrack for just a second here, Matt, because there's several shots in here as she touches the Palantiri. When she's with Finrod, she cries. So obviously she feels a great sense of loss. But also that lovely shot, my favorite shot from the previous trailer with all the fire and bodies hanging in the air. That's in there in those weights of images also. But I do want to go back to what Muriel says to Galadriel. It has arrived the moment we feared. So is what we're seeing the moment that they fear, or is it something else?
Well, there is a little bit of legend as to why the Palantiri ended up in Numenor, and that was so that the Numenorians could use them in order to feel better about the darkness that was coming. So maybe the darkness that is coming does have something to do with what Muriel is saying, but I don't know that if it's necessarily connected to what we're actually seeing, other than it just being part of Galadriel's past. Maybe she's seeing something in her past, but normally you're just seeing what's happening in the present through another stone, from what I gather.
Well, that's what I thought too. So if this stone is something that she can see the past or the present through, that would make it special, right?
It would. I just don't know. You know how trailers are cut together, so I'm not certain there's any connection at all.
All right, well, we'll hold judgment on that. But something that I won't hold judgment on is of the Numenorians themselves. They've obviously bleeped up here, Matt.
Oh, yeah? How so?
Well, the leaves of the tree of Gondor fell off after the line of kings died there. So this tree, which I'm assuming is in Numenor, it's shedding leaves just like a snake sheds its skin in the dry season.
Snakes do that?
It doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. All I'm saying is that something's going wrong with Numenor if the leaves are suddenly falling off the tree of this place to that great degree. And we see a shot again that we saw actually in a prior trailer of Muriel walking through a passageway and the leaves kind of floating down on her. But with that tree, we now get the sense of what it actually is and where it comes from. And our knowledge of Tolkien's story proper tells us that this isn't right.
That is true.
Speaking of which, I don't think that there's much right with this person who these three on the cliff are overlooking. To be perfectly honest, I don't know what to think, but they don't have a very good look on their face. Looks kind of evil for somebody wearing white.
So you're saying it's not a good guys wear white hats all the time?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Now, could this be Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, also known by another name?
Well, I recently watched a video by The Nerdist that put all kinds of things out there, that the stranger was actually Anatar, and that the creature that we see here in a little bit in the trailer that seems to be stalking Bronwyn is Sauron. But I don't know what to make of any of that. I feel like it may be a red herring that the Nerdist is putting out, or really bad guesses, or it could be exactly right. What I do know is that Anatar is supposed to be the one who ends up convincing Celebrimbor and the elves to forge the rings. So, is it this old guy who fell to earth like a meteor? Or is it this young person who, outside of the menacing appearance, seems to have a very angelic-like look?
Don't forget that later on we see that person committing some really dark kind of magic that involves fire and stuff.
And also don't forget that the person who the Nerdist thinks is Anatar, who we know as the stranger, makes all of that fire that's around him when he falls not hot to the touch of the Harfoot, according to the reports in Comic-Con. So I would imagine that they're probably going to spend this whole first season trying to make it a mystery as to who is Sauron, who is Anatar, and all of that.
Oh no, they're going down the same path as my old employer, the Wheel of Time, where they made the reveal of who the Dragon Reborn was last way too long.
Possibly so. But let's continue on with the trailer.
All right. I don't think we need to go through every single shot, though. We're not Bubba and Catfish, who go through everything frame by frame. By the way, check them out at the word double, the letters PHQ on Twitter. At any rate, I don't think we need to go through every single shot. We could just kind of give a synopsis of what we're seeing, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
And we've got an establishing shot of Moria, and then we hear King Durin, who is Durin III, that's our Prince Durin IV's father, saying, "Beyond the darkness, tempting shadow, to bury us all beneath the mountain." Pretty intense, but what do you think he's talking about? Now, we know we have a Balrog at the end of this trailer. It does have some similarities to Peter Jackson's Balrog. It's not exactly the same. But could King Durin be talking about the Balrog?
Or could he be talking about the Mithril? Because, as you know from all the stories, it's the Mithril that ends up driving the dwarves to dig too deep and unearth the Balrog at Khazad-dûm. As for the Balrog itself, I guess we could save it for later, but why don't we go ahead and talk about it now? I don't think it's the same Balrog, but I could be completely wrong. And folks, we want you to tell us why we're completely wrong about our analysis of this trailer. Please tweet to @BustBlockbuster on Twitter, or you can send emails to mattsaudioblog@gmail.com, or you can leave comments on the different posts at mattsaudioblog.com or on the YouTube. And the YouTube video will probably be out after the audio podcast comes out, a few days after, because we're trying to work into the schedule in between the episodes of Double P covering Only Murders in the Building. But hopefully you'll get this content on their YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/c/the word double, the letter P, the word media, and leave comments there as well. Let us know what you think of our analysis.
Which probably won't be having much thought about our analysis other than listening and going, no, they're wrong, and then moving on. But we'd love to hear how we're wrong. So please leave comments on the YouTube.
Exactly. Now, the next group of shots is Galadriel, and she's in this fiery place. It looks like a village somewhere that has just been completely destroyed. And I'm going to go ahead and make a connection to later on in the trailer. We see Galadriel standing in a village very similar with people all around and everything, because we see her wake up here and she's got all of this stuff all over her face, all of the debris from the explosion or whatever. But we see the explosion wave actually coming towards the village at the end of the trailer. And she's there and she kind of braces for it. I would imagine probably expecting to perish. And instead she wakes up, and I think this is what she finds.
So you're saying that it's not connected to the image that we saw before with all the bodies hanging in the air or whatever?
Actually, I think they're hanging in water. The Nerdist pointed this out, and it kind of made me rethink that whole scene, Coach. I think that those bodies are actually below the ocean, and the fire that we're seeing isn't anything more than Numenor burning. Now, could they be related in the fact that Galadriel is on Numenor while it's burning? I suppose that's a possibility. But I think what we are seeing here is her in the aftermath of whatever we see happen at the end of the trailer. It's just kind of out of sequence and meant to fool us into thinking we're into some kind of fiery hell.
Well, that would be disappointing. Darn it.
Yeah, sorry, Coach.
In the next set of shots, we see like this far off, kind of almost like ice fortress. And it seems like it's part of a dream that this boy Theo is having. He gets woke up by an old man who asks him if he's ever heard of Sauron. So what I'm wondering is, what is this fortress? I mean, not Barad-dûr, is it? Could it be Morgoth's old fortress? I think that was called Angband. But wasn't it kind of under three volcanoes, the Thangorodrim?
Yeah, I don't know if it's either of them. I think that this is probably the ice fortress that we see Galadriel and the gang going into after they've done a lot of climbing of waterfalls and all of that other stuff in other trailers, and where the snow troll is probably at. So I don't know if Theo is actually dreaming this or not, but he definitely has a connection to Sauron somehow. He's got this mark on his arm that would seemingly indicate so. And I can't analyze all these symbols, as we said before. I'm no Tolkien expert, so sorry about that. Get your analysis for that somewhere else.
Kind of starting to wonder why people listen to us at all. You keep sending them away. And I believe that symbol is kind of like one of the old Morgul blades. It's on the rock, and we see that blade in Theo's hands later on. It's looks like that blade ends up reforming itself while it's in Theo's hands, which is kind of alarming. But when the guy asks him about Sauron, he backs away real quick, and the shot changes real quick to Bronwyn, who has locked herself into a closet-like kind of thing, trying to hide from this creature that's coming up out of the floor. Now, is this the one that you're saying that the Nerdist is saying is Sauron?
Well, I think one of the things that they pointed to was the fact that the hand on this particular creature kind of matched the hand that we see all of the orcs bowing to later on. And I honestly can't tell you what Sauron's true form ever was. I haven't researched the Silmarillion enough to be able to tell you if there's a distinct description of him being like this. But boy, is that scene creepy. It's really tense.
Well, it certainly is that, and I enjoy that. I enjoy scaring the bejesus out of people like Bronwyn when I used to Trolloc around, for sure. Now, come on, Matt, skip ahead a little bit, as Catfish likes to say. Let's pick things up here. We're moving kind of slow, and my Camelin barbecue is getting cold.
Okay, well, we've covered what we think is a Morgul blade reforming itself in Theo's hands, and we've covered most of the ice cavern stuff. One shot that we do get is something being hurled at the elves. Now, I'm going to presume by the snow troll. And I'm sorry, I can't properly credit who said this, but somebody said that they saw like the image of something coming out of that block after it landed on the elves. I guess my computer screen isn't resolute enough, or I didn't freeze frame it at the right point, but I didn't see it. There are words that are spoken there that saying if the evil is left unchecked, it will take us all. And then a quick shot of Bronwyn hugging Theo and saying, "Find the light and the shadow will not find you." In between there, as the object hits in front of the elves, it cuts to a quick, like, explosion of a boat.
Well, I already had this conversation with Greenie earlier in the episode. I don't know what caused that explosion. I'm just going to say magic. I'm not going to complain about it.
Well, neither am I. I think it would be silly to complain about it. But that's a Greenie thing, I suppose.
Yeah, you can be annoying sometimes.
But where do you think that is?
Well, now that's a good question. I don't have any idea. It looks like that there are some Numenorians. I don't know exactly which ones. Possibly Elendil. They're on the dock, so could this be more of the destruction of Numenor?
That's a distinct possibility. If it's this wave of explosion that kind of wipes out that village that Galadriel was at, perhaps it hurled up some debris that might cause an explosion of that type on a boat.
Yeah, just a guess there. And you got that shot of the guy that the Nerdist is saying is Sauron also, with the similar hands to the creature coming out of the hole, and a bunch of orcs bowing to him. And then we've got this shot of Halbrand, who is one of our Numenorian men, I suppose. He's in front of this really intricate building. There's Numenorian guards on either side of him. Looks kind of like the same spot where we saw that gathering in the last trailer as well.
I would agree with that.
And then we hear Bronwyn say, "Together we can survive this." We see her rallying people to fight. She's standing up on some kind of wooden scaffold, and Arondir is standing near her. And then we have that circular shot again of the elves raising their swords. A lot of people are convinced that this is the Oath of Fëanor, which has legendary status among Tolkien fans. I don't believe in making any kind of oath where I have to lift a sword.
Okay, so any analysis on any of that?
I think it pretty much says what it is.
And I think you're absolutely right. As our friend Priscilla TV pointed out in a comment in our last YouTube, she also believed that it was the Oath of Fëanor that we were witnessing there with the elves. And then we turn to Galadriel again. She's boarding a ship. I think, judging on the architecture here, it looks like that she's on Numenor. And she urges someone to fight with her, and you see arms locked in some kind of agreement. So maybe whatever it is that she saw in the Palantir has now inspired her to go on a quest that might end up leading to that fortress where the snow troll is. I don't know. I'm just trying to connect things together.
Well, that's not bad, I don't guess. Now we get to Arondir. And Arondir's got some moves, man. We talked earlier about the fact that he's a Sylvan elf. Are they exclusive to that kind of thing? Does that only happen with Sylvan elves?
I think all elves can fight pretty much that way. You're going to see Galadriel be pretty badass as well. Maybe the Sylvan elves just practice their acrobatics more, because Arendir's got quite the move here, falling down and then kicking that rock over. And they make it seem like that's what causes that avalanche that buries all of those orcs.
Yeah, I feel terrible for those orcs. I love orcs,
Yes, I know that you do. Then we get a shot back to Numenor and Muriel where she says, each of us must decide who we shall be. And she's holding a child. This, I believe, is some kind of ceremony that happens on Numenor. Not really as a tribute, but just as some kind of ceremony. It then shifts to Durin IV, the prince, who appears to be holding up some mithril. And a quick shot of Brawin and Aramir looking at each other. I don't know, are they sad?
I think they definitely look worried.
And a shot of Galadriel leading an army across the field, a cavalry army, all on horses. Then a shot of some orcs running through the woods, I think chasing after Aramir, but I don't want to say that for certain. But it feels like they're chasing after Aramir there.
That's what I got too.
And then Galadriel is swimming. There's a boat that has begun to sink, and there's this great sea creature that appears to have attacked it and is finishing it off, and she's trying to swim away from it. Now, I've heard a lot of people comment that there aren't really any sea monsters in Tolkien's world. True, but there are water-inhabiting monsters right outside of Durin's home, right? The Watcher, didn't it take residence up there when all of the hobbits tried to do passage through the Misty Mountains with Gandalf? So I'm not saying that this creature is related to the Watcher. I'm just saying that if the Watcher can be in a lake, why can't a bigger creature be in the sea?
I would agree with that, and the bigger the monster, the better. I enjoy seeing boats get destroyed like they're just little toys, like this is what appears to be happening here.
Then we hear some words, there can be no trust between hammer and rock. I'm not sure what that's about. And then there's this procession in Numenor happening. And then another shot of Durin, who may be saying what we heard earlier, because they show this shot of him stopping dwarf troops to come to attention or something like that. And then we get back to the stranger, who is really doing stuff that we've already seen in previous trailers, making rocks swirl. Looks like there's a lot of fire around him. Now, it appears that one of the Harfoots, and I'm assuming that's Nori, is standing right on top of some of that rock that is on fire, but she does not seem to be affected by it. So that, to me, Coach, says that at least some of this has to be some kind of illusion, or at least not as lethal as it appears to be.
Well, that's an interesting thing. I want to point back to a moment in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings films where Gandalf had exposed the ring to fire in order to see the dark writing on it, and he had Frodo take it and told him it wasn't hot. Is this the same kind of effect here? Would that help point to the fact that this stranger is in fact Anatar, the Lord of Gifts?
Ooh, that's an interesting point, Coach. I hadn't thought about that. What do you guys think? Tweet to @BustBlockbuster on Twitter, or you can send emails to mattsaudioblog@gmail.com.
Yeah, that's mattsaudioblog@gmail.com. Moving on, we've got another cool Aramir shot. All of this seems to be happening in the same place where we've seen him do other acrobatic things with a chain on him. Comes flying off of a rock towards a guy. There's a quick shot in there of somebody getting thrown to the ground. And then another shot of Aramir being tossed into a pit. I think where the fight is actually happening. So I think that this shot is actually happening before the fight commences. And it looks like these are orcs that he's fighting. And then we have the shot of my good friend Billy Orc. He appeared with me on Get Up earlier in the podcast. A great dude. Oh, I love that shot of him. Look at that smile. It's so cute.
Yeah. Okay. And then we do have that wave that looks like kind of an explosive wave coming at Galadriel, and she just kind of closes her eyes like she thinks this is it. And I think that this is what happens. And then she wakes up, which we actually saw earlier in the trailer, after everything is all fire and ash.
Okay, well, maybe I can see that now. I'm just kind of disappointed that we're not seeing tormented souls in the air. I was really hoping to get some fire and hell in this show.
Well, I mean, don't give up on that yet, Coach. We're likely to see some human and elf and dwarf torment as this series goes on.
I sure hope so.
And finally, we get this shot of that person that we saw earlier who is staring mean up at the three people on the cliff. Now they're doing magic. They're blowing into their hand and ashes come out. The ashes form into a leaf. The leaf floats around and we hear a voice say, "You have been told many lies of Middle-earth." And the leaf falls to the ground and burns up.
That's kind of ominous. I mean, if that's not Sauron, I don't know who that is.
Well, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see, and they're likely going to take the whole season till they tell us.
The Wheel of Time mistake once again. Oh, well.
And then we get this shot of Aramir, and it looks like he's in the woods, and these hands grab his shoulders and pull him back into the thicket of roots and what have you.
That's got to be an ent, right? That's got to be some kind of ent. I don't think it's actually the tree that Tom Bombadil kept around. I don't think they're in that same place. So it's got to be just an ent who's grabbing him. You think he's grabbing him to eat him, or do you think he's grabbing him to save him?
I'm wondering if if the ent is grabbing him to save him, perhaps from the orcs. We just don't know it yet.
I like that guess. And you get the big ending with the titles and all of that stuff, and finally you get the Balrog. So, Matt, what did you think of this trailer?
Well, I really enjoyed it. It made me excited for the series. I don't know how much there is to analyze in all of those quick shots. Did we pretty much cover everything?
I think that we did, and I think that my Caleb barbecue is cold, so let's get the heck out of here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, folks, for listening. We want to hear what you thought of this trailer. We want to know what you thought as to how we analyzed it. We want you to tell us what we got right, what we got wrong. More importantly, what we got wrong. There is one other thing that we need to do, Coach.
Oh, God, what?
Well, we need to check in with our Twitter poll, because we did put a poll out at BusBlockbuster on Twitter, and we asked people what they thought of the trailer. We gave them 3 choices. They either loved it, they're more excited for the show now, they're still on the fence about the show, or this trailer turned them off and they're going to skip the show. Out of 1,800 votes on the 100 Twitter,
oh, I know what you mean there.
83.3% of them thought that this trailer made them more excited for the show.
Wow, that's a lot.
Now, 11% were still on the fence, and nearly 6% said that it turned them off. But it's still a clear majority that really liked this trailer.
Yeah, it's been a great week for trailers all across Comic-Con. I know that there's several Marvel trailers as well that came out. So when you cover more Marvel stuff, I'm sure you're going to want to talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah, I haven't even seen Thor Love and Thunder yet.
Oh, you should see it, Matt. Our friends over at TV Podcast Industries have already reviewed it. I've seen the film myself, but if you haven't, I won't spoil you or anything. I'll just say to our listeners, go listen to our friends at TV Podcast Industries. They got you covered as far as Thor Love and Thunder goes.
I'm sure that they thank you for that plug, Coach, because you do absolutely represent a voice of complete integrity.
Well, what do you mean?
And that's all that we have for you this time, folks. Thanks for listening. Take care.
Bye.
Part of Double P Media, doublepmedia.com.